Welcome to Liberate Your People Pleaser. I am your host, Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and you might be a people pleaser if you sacrifice your needs or your wants or your feelings to benefit someone else, or you keep silent when something bothers you or upsets you, or you're super critical and feel like you're probably your own worst enemy. Well, here's what I've got in store for you for this podcast. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you and you don't need fixing. What we need to do is leverage the superpowers of being a people pleaser, because there are definite superpowers. You are super intuitive, I am sure. You have great powers of empathy, the ability to read a situation and know what's going on with people and those around you. So what we're going to do in each episode is talk about ways to disempower the parts of it that are diminishing and don't serve us anymore, and level up or empower all those superpowers. So join me in the next episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. For such a time as this? That was the question of, surprisingly maybe for you to hear from me on this podcast, a gentleman who shows up in a Bible story in the Old Testament of all things. So it was Mordecai who was talking to Queen Esther, who was a Jewish woman who had been chosen to be married by the king at the time, who was not Jewish. And in fact, there was a plot to destroy the Jewish people, as there so often is. And so Mordecai came to Queen Esther and asked her to petition the king to save the Jews' lives. And she did just that, of course. And his remark to her was, you know, maybe you have become queen for such a time as this. And I feel like we're all sort of in that place right now in our own little ways, whether, you know, we're on a big stage for some reason or just functioning within our home, our family. I've been staying with one of my daughters who has 2 children. So of course they're in school at home. And then she's helping 2 neighborhood children. So there are 4 children here every day going to school, 2 in kindergarten, 1 in 1st grade, 1 in 4th grade, that she's helping get through this crazy, you know, remote learning elementary school thing that we're in now because of the pandemic. And I am just floored, you know, every day as she gets through the day with these kids, helping them, you know, stay engaged with their teachers, get on the platforms when they need to, and all the things. And so she is here for such a time as this. So I don't want you to think for a moment that whatever way you're showing up in your own leadership role, whether it's in a community, in your work, politically, or just in your family, there's no just, okay, when we're here and we're showing up for ourselves and for what life is bringing us. And it really made me think about some of the big leaps I've taken in my life, because I'm getting ready to take another one. I'll tell you more about that in the next podcast, spoiler alert. But today, I just want to talk about how these big leaps play out in our lives. And, you know, sometimes you have a big leap, or maybe all of us feel like we just took a big leap, you know, back in March in the US anyway, because of the pandemic. Because sometimes big leaps are sort of thrust upon us, right? We don't really choose it, or there's a set of circumstances that create something that just creates a need for a big shift in our lives. And so sometimes we have it thrust upon us, and then other times we invite it, like even if it's not something very fun, like the ending of a relationship or leaving a job or something like that, that might have its, you know, sort of a double-edged sword of sadness or grief or loss along with it. It's still something we choose to do. So I'll tell you a couple of stories of my big leaps. So one of my first ones was when I was I was in my 30s. So I was about 35, and I was a real estate agent working for another real estate agent. I was his, you know, like assistant. In today's world of real estate, it would be like being on his team. And we worked very well together. He sold a ton of real estate. I was having fun. It was a great job. We worked in a small independent office. We were in a small town in North Carolina. Everything's great. And then because of a change in my situation, I was getting divorced. I wasn't making nearly enough money to support my family. And so I knew I had to do something, and I had to do something big. I needed to increase my income by about 50% more than what it was at the time. So not doubling my income, but half again as much. Now, keep in mind, I don't even have a college degree. Okay. So it's not like whatever. I felt like in the small rural town of North Carolina with no college degree, I had a lot of options. But the person I was working for encouraged me to go to the owner of the real estate company that we both worked for and suggest to them that they hire me as their first full-time non-competing sales manager. So I would not be selling real estate, competing with the agents. I would just do the office management job, which they had never had anybody do. And so I took that leap. And, did I talk about imposter syndrome? Holy smokes. But I had a family to support. And I had this man who believed in me that I admired. And he knew very well, he knew the office, he knew the business, he knew my skills. So when he told me that, he believed I would be a great choice for that job, it just kind of gave me the confidence I needed. And sure enough, I went and pitched the idea to the owner and his two sons who ran the company, and they hired me to be their first manager. So suddenly within, a few weeks, I'm making, half again as much more than I made before. It was a huge leap. It was a huge leap professionally. It was a huge leap financially for me. It was a huge leap for my family. It kept me close, working very close to where the kids went to school. So as we all adjusted to being a single parent household, I was close by geographically to them, which just simplified all of our lives because their dad lived out of town about an hour or so. So he wasn't really around to help much except on the weekends. So that was just a huge win for me. And so it was that ability to show up for something, even though it sort of intimidated me, right? I didn't even know what imposter syndrome was at that time. Now I know. I've read books on it. A lot of people talk about it. But at the time, I didn't understand. But despite my imposter syndrome, I showed up for such a time as this. I'll tell you another time it happened. Actually, this is also in a professional way. So I had left a relationship and I had just finished my coach training. So I'm a new coach. I hadn't really planned on launching my business alone yet. In other words, the relationship I had been in, he had offered to support me financially while I got my business off the ground. So that was great. I had quit my job, so I don't have a job. Then we end up splitting up in a very unexpected, way that neither one of us planned for. So all of a sudden I'm unemployed. I don't have a place to live. And I don't really have a job. I've just finished my coach training. I haven't done anything to start building a practice or, my own business or anything. So I do the only smart thing you could do at that point, right, is run off to San Diego. I love San Diego. I love being by the beach. And, suddenly I didn't have children in school anymore. This was a handful of years ago. So all my kids are adults. I don't have to live in any one place. Coaching is a remote gig. So I thought I'm going to go to San Diego and just try to heal from this relationship and, decide, what to do next. Should I get my coaching business off the ground or go find another job or whatever? So I never felt really driven, or it never felt like inspired action for me to go get a job. So I just started working on my coaching business. I started creating some programs and I started blogging and, starting my email list and all the things you do. Well, I didn't have very much business, as you can imagine, starting something from scratch like that. I had, a few clients, a few programs, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, a real estate company that I used to work for reached out to me about doing a project for them that we were, had talked in the past about doing. And in the course of discussing that project again, they offered me a full-time management position that put me back in a six-figure income again. So here I went from, I was really out of my savings, out of everything, and stressing about making my car payment next month, to all of a sudden having six figures. So taking big leaps is, I don't want to paint a totally rosy picture. Of course, it has its challenges, both of those situations. I just gave you the, super fun version of them. There were a lot of sleepless nights in between. There were things that I tried that didn't work and whatever. But the thing about a big leap, even if you've just taken one that you didn't choose in the last year, I'm sure you can see how every time we put ourselves out there and we create or have thrust upon us these big changes, it's an opportunity for us to grow in leaps and bounds as well. And so me, being a person who's totally obsessed with my own personal and spiritual growth and just becoming the best version of me that I can possibly be all the time, this is not a destination I'm going to get to. I'm not going to be done. When I have my first $1 million in business or whatever, I'm not going to be done. I'm going to still be searching for that next highest expression of myself, that next, sort of highest version of myself. And so every time I take one of these leaps, or a leap is thrust upon me, I know that I am also leaping towards that next highest expression of myself. So I'm really curious, as you hear this and you hear these stories of mine, if you can relate to it. Maybe you've done bigger things than I've done. Goodness knows, there are plenty of people who do bigger things than I've done, riskier things than I've done. Or maybe you feel like yours is quote unquote smaller, but big and small don't really exist in the universe. So I would love to hear some of the leaps you've taken, whether they've been thrust upon you or you chose to take them, and how you can see, even if it's not until later, sometimes it takes some wisdom and hindsight to realize how that also was a forward leap in your own evolution. I think it's always an invitation for who we can become. So I would love to hear some of the ways that you have come into this highest expression of yourself that you're in right now from your big leaps.
All right. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. Hey, I've got 3 more things for you. One is join my private Facebook group, Liberate Your People Pleaser. We have lots of great conversations. I do Facebook Lives in there, drop in free resources, all kinds of cool things to support you in your journey to liberate your people pleaser. So the link for that is in the show notes. Second, I would love it if you would put a 5-star review on whatever podcast service that you found the podcast on. That would be totally awesome, and I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. And last but not least, if you've got a question you would like for me to answer or address, you'll also find a link in the show notes to do that. So submit your question and you'll hear me talk about it on a future episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. I'll see you in the next episode, everyone. Bye-bye.